Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. This is another X231 video. It's part, I've lost track what part it is. If you're here, you've already read the title, so you likely already know. But now that we have the differential set in the rear end housing, it's time to work on axles, bowl gears, start filling these tubes up. So we've got big hubs on the floor. We've got big axles on the floor. We have big gears on the bench. We have big bearing housings. And as typical for X231, we also have big problems that I'm going to be asking you guys for advice on here in a bit. Stay tuned. So we'll start off with a brief comparison between the prototype bowl gears and the production bowl gears. Really no differences between these. Tooth count is the same, width is the same, spline cut and the hubs is the same, offsets are the same, diameters same, all critical dimensions are the same. Main difference is of course casting numbers and condition. So we'll take a look at the prototype one. We have the 10X1521, and they still even took the time to put MM Made in USA, even on a prototype gear. So they were proud of that. We have the production number 10A6128. Still do have the MM Made in USA. Like I said, condition is what really sets these gears apart. Now, these are driven by those smaller bowl pinions that I had to replace in the prior video. In case you forgot, there are these small gears right here on each side of the differential. And since I had to abandon the prototype bowl pinions for the production ones, that basically commits me to having to also use the production bowl gears to keep these as a match set. Another reason why I'm going with the production bowl gears over the prototypes is that these prototype ones are just beyond worn out. You can see on the drive side a lot of brittling, a lot of small metallic pieces starting to come off. You can see the way the light reflects on all these teeth. They are not flat, they're not polished anymore. There's dips and humps and ridges, and they're just shot. In every way, they're just shot. So that's my comparison. And the bowl gears, unfortunately, more X231 pieces are having to sit out and be substituted for by the production parts. So that's the bowl gear rundown. Next, we'll look at the axles real quick. This pair right here is out of X231. They are the prototypes. This is a production 445 axle. We'll ignore that one for now. We're just going to look at these two to start with. Interesting fact, this is not a match set. Both of these axles are different from one another. Overall length is the same. Bearing locations are the same. Spline cut's the same. But the first difference I noticed was the threaded portion for the bowl gear nut on this axle is 2 inches in diameter, where this one is only 1 3/4 inches. Another subtle difference is this axle has a snap ring groove to act as a travel stop for the wheel hub. This one does not. Third difference, this axle has no number on it at all, whereas this one has a hand-scribed 10A6488 in it. So it's almost like these two axles right here kind of show a evolutionary design process in a way, where they made a few changes, like with the threaded ends, adding the travel stop snap ring at the end. And it's almost like this was kind of a pre-production version that was even assigned a 10A number over what would be probably the original version, which is this one right here. Now I'll roll the 445 production axle up for a quick comparison. We have the same 1 3/4 inch threaded end here, same spline cut, same inner axle bearing location, but we notice on the production version the outer axle bearing is 2 inches further down the shaft than on this prototype set. Another thing we have that is different, the prototype axles have a round 3/4 inch keyway slot, whereas the production axles all had a square 3/4 inch keyway slot. And they also have the snap ring groove here on the end, much like the pre-production version right here. The difference in this outer axle bearing location is they probably put it a little further out to add a little bit more stability, a little less load on that bearing. But then that brings us to the bearing housings. These housings are what bolt on the ends of the axle tubes. And since those axle tubes are all the same length on the prototype rear end housing and production, the difference in bearing location can be accounted for by these bearing housings right here. These housings hold not only the outer bearing race, but the axle seals as well. So we'll just take a look at X231's housings. They have a 10X5010 on each one. Production's a 10A 8065, and really the only difference in these is the height. That's where the production has the extra 2 inches of distance for this outer axle bearing. It's all taken up in this housing. So that finally brings us to the differences in the wheel hubs. These two rustier ones are the originals from X231. These two are production 445. Interesting thing about these, they both have a 10A370 casting number in them, although there are subtle differences, mainly the keyway. Again, we have this 3/4 round keyway slot in the prototype, and the production has the 3/4 square, as does every other 445 that's ever been made. So X231 has almost like pre-production hubs on it as well that were already given a 10A number, but still are a bit different from the production versions with this round key slot that's in both of them. So now that we've got all that out of the way, I'll explain to you again real quick why I do all these comparisons between prototype parts, production parts, showing the similarities or the differences between, X231's pieces and the run-of-the-mill 445 stuff. It's because, I like X231 because of the uniqueness factor and how it has all these subtle little differences that a production tractor doesn't have, and it really kind of helps us go back in time and figure out what the evolutionary design process was for them transitioning from the earlier ZB line up to the 445s. And my goal this whole time has been to use as many of the 10X pieces over again as is reasonably possible. Those little subtle differences and the uniqueness factor to me is what makes X231 such an interesting tractor. Therein lies my problem, though, that I mentioned earlier. A lot of these axle and bull gear pieces suffered the same fate as that differential carrier and ring gear, and unfortunately I found some real problems with the prototype axles. So we'll go over to the bench over there. I'll show you what I got going on. So when I started examining the prototype axles, I quickly found some issues with the splines out here. You can see in the light we kind of have a line right there, followed by a bit of a shinier patch back here. That indicates excessive wear on these splines where the bull gear needs to be tight. And sure enough, when I fitted the production bull gear to the prototype axle, this is what I found. This is an absolute no-go situation right here. The axle splines are wore so bad that the gear is riding entirely too far back on them, and the nut is not going to be able to exert any pressure on the gear whatsoever. I'll show you what you want to see. This is a production 445 axle that is in good shape, also a gear that is in good shape, and you want to see the gear tighten in on the splines like this long before the axle splines stick proud of the face of the gear. So about the only way an axle can wear splines that badly is if the old bull gear had been running loose on there for a long time, wallowing those splines out, wearing them away, and now they're just so thin that the gear rides entirely too far back and cannot be kept tight, and that is an absolute no-go for 2 reasons. First reason being, even if I could cobble a spacer to go under the nut to force the gear so far onto the shaft that it remains tight, the inside portion of my gear is going to be contacting this portion of the case metal on metal according to my measurements, so that is no good. Second no-go is also if I force the gear so far in towards the case, the teeth are going to walk out of mesh with the bull pinion and start contacting the inner race of the bull pinion bearing. Again, absolute no-go situation. So here are my options. I'm going to lay them out for you guys and get ask for your feedback regarding which way you would proceed if you were in my shoes. Option number 1, which would be the easiest, but I really don't like, abandon the prototype axles altogether, use the production axles. I'm already using the production bull gears that I know would be a good fit, but then I would also have to discard the unique prototype bearing housings and go with the taller production 10As. I would also then have to use the production square cut keyway wheel hubs. That would be a direct bolt-on solution, but I just hate it because I'm eliminating way too many of the unique 10X parts that I'd really like to use over again. Option number 2, I could take the prototype axles into a machine shop, have them weld these old splines completely in and cut new ones in their place and hope that they would be all the proper dimensions to give me the good bull gear to axle fit that I require, with no guarantees that they're going to come back the proper dimension, and a price tag that's going to go in the thousands of dollars for such a one-off job, and probably a time delay of weeks to possibly a month or more waiting to get these back. I could at least then reuse the prototype axles, but I don't really feel good about that plan either. Third option, and honestly this is the one I'm leaning towards right now, take my production axles, fixture them in the lathe, and machine this bearing surface back the additional 2 inches to make a reasonable facsimile of these prototype axles. I still would not have the round cut keyway, but I can utilize the square cut keyway, make a custom key that is square on the bottom, rounded on the top, so then I can still use my pre-production wheel hubs that came off of X231. I can still use the unique 10X bearing housings, and for the most part, the overall outside dimensions of the tractor would stay the same. I'm already, like I said, using the production bull gears. I would like to have axles that are a good fit in them, and actually I need to have axles that are a good fit in those. And this is a solution I can do here myself, and I can keep the progress rolling right along. So that's my situation, and those are the options I have on the table right now. And I really thought I was just going to roll right into throwing axles and bull gears into this thing, keep that ball rolling. But X231 just doesn't ever give you anything. You have to work for every little bit of progress. You got to earn it every step of the way. And I've never been into another machine that had an entire case that had all of its contents just destroyed like X231. I mean, they did their level best to kill the back end of this tractor back in the day. I hate the fact that I've already had to throw away so many 10X components that just could not be reused, and now I'm looking at doing the same thing again with these axles. But in order to utilize as many of the other pre-production or prototype components as I can, I think modifying those production axles is going to be the way to go, and it's going to be probably the best guaranteed fit of all the pieces that I have. So, but let me know what you do. How would you proceed with this? And if I'm missing another option, hey, feel free to post it up. I'll read it. I'll take any advice you got. I gladly welcome it all. So thanks for watching, guys. Hope to see you back again.